Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. So Earl Spence and Terrence Crawford are still trying to sort things out. My understanding is the deal's already done. Terrence Crawford signed his part on the contract for a 55%, 45% split. 55% to Earl Spence, 45% to Terrence Crawford. But this is the problem. Sources are saying Terrence Crawford wants more money. Now, if he's already signed the contract, I don't see how he can go back and talk about wanting more money. Okay, it looks like it's going to be a 50% split of all pay-per-view. So Terrence Crawford can make more money than he's ever made, and we understand Terrence Crawford. We understand his resume, but for him to think he deserves a 50-50 split of the money is absurd. Or if he thinks he deserves, as far as pay-per-view, more than 50% of the pay-per-view, that's absurd. So this is the problem it's creating. It's causing Terrence Crawford to continue to remain inactive. Earl Spence, didn't fight long ago, but he's been out the ring for a couple months. See, and we're about to run into a problem because Terrence Crawford has a belt, but Earl Spence has 3. And Earl Spence has a mandatory in the WBA with Stanley Eunice. Now, what's going to start happening is Earl Spence is going to be put in a position to either defend one of his 3 belts, or they may come and try to force him to defend all 3, which is impossible for him to do. And as a result, he's going to have to relinquish a belt. So the longer they wait, the longer whoever's at fault. Sources are saying it's Terrence Crawford, but many people are picking Terrence Crawford to win that fight. But sources are saying Terrence Crawford is the one that is holding up announcing the fight because he feels like he deserves more money, and he agreed to something that he wasn't 100% on. And in my opinion, that's just crap. You get an opportunity to fight for 3 belts. You have 1. Get in there like Devin Haney, and go out there and forget all the BS. You're getting more than what he deserves, in my opinion. Okay, but he's getting a fair split. The 55-45 is a sweet spot. Take it. Majority of people think he's going to win the fight, but a lot of people favor Spence. But I would say it's like a 60 or 70% of people versus 30 to 40% feel Terrence Crawford is going to win. And my thing is go in there and fight him. Fight Earl Spence. Beat him. Then you get all the belts. Want to do the rematch? Then you can go out there, man, and you'll be the A side. You would have hooked the big fish. And then you sit there and decide on what you should get. And I bet you if Terrence Crawford wins the undisputed distinction, and there's a rematch, I guarantee you he's going to want 70-30 or 80-20. The same thing he's complaining about. I bet you if he beats Spence, right? That's a big if. I bet you he's going to want the lion's share. So you just have to be fair and realistic about this. But one thing it shouldn't be in the rematch, and this is where I think it's stupid when it comes to negotiations. And this is where Eddie Hearn gets it right. And anyone else who does it this way. If you and I are going to fight, right? And I'm the A side, or you're the A side, and you decide it's going to be a 60-40 split in your favor, okay? And then we do a rematch, I win. And then we say if I win, I get 60 and you get 40, right? So we have the first fight, I win. I took 40%, you took 60. We have the second fight, I get 60%, you took 40. That's stupid, because you know what that means? It's a 50-50 split right down the board. That's dumb. So it really doesn't give the champion an advantage. So that's where negotiations, to me, the champion or the A side should definitely get something like a 60-40 or a 70-30. Or if not 60-40 is fine, but going to the rematch, make it a 50-50 split. But it's got to be to where the champion, in my opinion, benefits greater than the challenger over 2 fights because they're not equal, okay? But when you do, hey, I'll take 70-30, and if you beat me, then you can take 70-30. That's 50-50 split, man, over 2 fights. That's stupid. So that's where you hit these sticking points. Because Terrence Crawford right now, and that's why I said if Errol Spence is giving him 55-45, that is the sweet spot. And if Crawford wins, if they do the contract right, Errol Spence should go into the second fight as the A side as well, because he's giving him a chance at belts. If not, it should be a 55-45, or watch this, right? Errol Spence has 3 belts. Crawford has 1. If Errol Spence gives Crawford a 55-45 split on the first fight, and they go into the second fight, and Crawford takes 70 and gives Spence 30 over 2 fights, who would have made more money? The guy who had less belts coming into the fight. That is not how this should play out. The guy with the most belts should get the most money over the 2 fights, in my opinion. Because if that's the case, then what does it even matter to have the belts? Especially a guy like Spence. So that's where I'm not sure if Crawford understands. Well, I know he understands. He's a smart man. But he's just got to come to the realization that it is what it is. But enough about Crawford and Spence, okay? We know the fight's happening in October. It's supposed to be the end of October the 29th. And somebody's saying that maybe the first week, but 4 key sources are saying 29th of October. So I believe that date. But this thing about Crawford and the money split, that's madness. Okay? That's just madness. But enough about that. This is the problem we're running into. Got those mandatories I was talking about. Yo, the mandatories are coming down for Errol Spence. So when you look at the Ring Magazine's ranking, right? They got Spence at number 1, Crawford at number 2 at welterweight. And that's correct. Okay? No argument with that. You got Ennis at number 3. No argument with that. Yugas at 4, Virgil Ortiz at 5. I can see that. But Ortiz needs to figure out what he's doing. Then you have Stanley Eunice at 6. And then one time, all the time, Keith Thurman at number 7. Avanesian at 8. Conor Benn at 9. Butiev at 10. Okay? But let's just look. So that's the ring and how they ranked them. So we got the 1 and 2 are going to fight. But if Crawford and Spence, for some reason, that they can't make it happen, this is what Spence is going to run into. It's going to be between, because Yugas, I don't think he's coming back no time soon. Virgil Ortiz, he's talking about continuing at 147, but I don't know. But you're going to have Ennis, Virgil Ortiz Jr., Stanley Eunice, and Thurman. Those 4 who are going to be potential opponents for Crawford and Spence. Now, when you start looking at mandatories, Amantis Stanley Eunice is the mandatory for the WBA. So if the WBA pushes Errol Spence to defend it, to defend that belt, and they go to purse bid, and these purse bids like $200,000, like some ridiculous amount of money, like an offensive amount. To avoid that purse bid, he's going to sit there and have to work a deal with Stanley Eunice, and the whole boxing world's going to be on fire. They're just going to be pissed because that fight between Spence and Crawford isn't happening. But that's what happens when you have these damn belts. So that's what Errol Spence is looking at. Stanley Eunice is in a great position if Crawford keeps screwing around. Now, aside from that, when you look at the WBC, you got Virgil Ortiz Jr. Virgil Ortiz is the number 1 in the WBC, the number 1 in the WBA. He's the number 1 in the WBO. And then he is number 11, for some reason, the IBF. But IBF, who cares about that? But Virgil Ortiz, Amantis Stanley Eunice, and then Jerome Bucinis is number 2 in the WBO, number 3 in the IBF, number 3 in the WBC, and number 2 in the WBA. So you got Amantis Stanley Eunice, because he's the mandatory in the WBA. But then you have Virgil Ortiz, Jerome Boots Ennis. Okay, and Keith Thurman. I did a video about this before. And Keith Thurman. those are the names. Keith Thurman's number 4, number 3, number 4, and then he's not even in the WIBF. That doesn't matter. But I told y'all before, don't be surprised if Keith Thurman slips in here and gets that fight. Keith Thurman and Jerome Boots Ennis were supposed to fight on the undercard. But I keep hearing rumors, now I don't know if it's true or not, that Keith Thurman is turning the fight down. And this is where y'all have to think, right? If Keith Thurman is turning the fight down with Jerome Boots Ennis after he said, okay, yeah, I'll fight him, but he didn't put his pen on paper, and he's like, nah, I'm not fighting him now. I said this in a couple videos. A lot of you didn't agree with me. But let's peel the layers back now. Keith Thurman doesn't want to fight Jerome Boots Ennis. Earl Spence and Terrence Crawford can't sort things out. The mandatories are going to start coming down. So Keith Thurman, so you got Al Heyman, you got, I don't know what Floyd Mayweather's role, but Leonard Ellaby, and you just, whoever's involved, people who can come out and make the next big fight for Earl Spence. Because I don't know what Crawford's doing or who he signed to, but for Earl Spence, who is the next biggest fight for Earl Spence outside of Crawford? Is it Virgil Ortiz? Is it Jerome Boots Ennis? Is it Amantis Stanionis? Or is it Keith Thurman? Not who you think, right? But let's, take the emotion out of it. As far as name, okay? As far as name, is it Amantis Stanionis, which is one of my favorite fighters? Is it Virgil Ortiz? Is it Jerome Boots Ennis? Right? Those are big names. Or Keith, one-time Thurman. Now watch Keith Thurman get in there and get this fight. I'm telling you, man. Keith Thurman's I'm telling you, watch Keith Thurman slip in there. Crawford is creating his own misery right now. He's hurting himself. But watch, I'm telling you, man, this is ridiculous. You got people making announcements, everyone getting excited, contracts are being signed, but I don't know if there is, when it comes to these guys and these agreements, I'm not sure if there's multiple steps, multiple phases to this contractual agreement where maybe there's certain documents that are signed and then the final set of documents has to get signed in order to finalize the deal. And maybe Crawford and Spence signed and agreed on different aspects of the fight, from who walks first, maybe even fight, maybe even the purse split, maybe pay-per-view, maybe, I say who fights first. I'm talking about who, the ring walk, maybe, I don't know, gloves. I mean, I don't know. But there's a lot of stuff when it comes to that, It's a lot. These guys can be really petty, really, really petty. But let's say they agreed to everything. And now they take all of those documents as a collective set, comprise it in this packet. And then that whole packet gets slid across the desk for them to come now with the promoter and whoever else, the lawyer, and sign. And that final signature, wet signature, is what finalizes the deal and makes them contractually obligated. And maybe that's the point they're at, where Crawford's like, okay, I understand I signed all this, but look, I feel like I shouldn't have done that. So I'm not finalizing any of this, putting my wet signature on here until we go back and we renegotiate this piece. And that's his right. Doesn't mean that we have to agree with him, but that's it. That's his right, if that's what's happened. But I believe, these guys have lawyers and stuff. Like, if it wasn't allowed, I'm sure it would have been pushed, fight would have been announced, he just would have been disgruntled. But it hasn't, they're holding back for some reason. So there must be some clause that allows him to go back now and say, hey, we need to relook at this. But my thing is, we're going to probably miss out on that fight this year. And you're going to see Stanionis get in there. You may see, then there's Rashidi, what's his name? Rashidi Ellis. You got this other guy here, okay? He's making noise. he may slide in there too. So we just don't know how the dust is going to fall. But I can't see the entire boxing world, all of these organizations, allowing the opportunity to have Spence and Crawford fight this year be missed. I just can't see them allow it to be missed, to have them put Spence or Crawford in a fight with an opponent where they'll make a tenth of what they'll make had they made the fight with the number 1 and 2 in the welterweight division. I just can't see that. I think these guys have a little bit of brain on them, some common sense. So that's what I think is going to happen. Those mandatories, they're going to resolve that, and nobody's going to have to pay step-aside money, and they're going to try to get this fight going. Hopefully they can sort that out. But since we're talking about mandatories, okay, sanctioning fees. Devin Haney just had a big fight in Australia, undisputed at lightweight. This man has to pay 400. Okay, somebody said 800-something thousand, almost $1 million, right? Now it may be 800,000 or close to $1 million, but I know that he has to pay for 3 of those belts is 3% of his fight purse, and for 1 of the belts is 2%. Okay, so if you figure he made $4 million, that's about $440,000 he has to pay. Okay, to the sanctioning bodies. Now there are other fees that are associated with being an undisputed champion and fighting for those belts. That could take his out the door cost to be undisputed somewhere near $1 million. That is ridiculous. And this is why fighters give up the belts. Now, the franchise belt, Devin Haney didn't want it. Kambosos is still, well, I don't know who has it now, but Devin Haney didn't want the franchise belt. He just wanted the WBA, BC, it's a regular WBC belt. He said that's the one that matters. He didn't want the franchise belt because you got to pay sanctioning fees on that. And he doesn't want to be in a position where he picks and chooses and has that flexibility. He recognizes that belt was just created to just get more money out the fighter. And I think it's a smart thing for the organization to do. I just think fighters have the right to say, I don't want that. And why would I give you money for this belt? It really doesn't matter. It just allows me to pick and choose what fights I want. Now, to me, it could be a good idea for a guy who wants to duck opponents, but for someone who doesn't want to pay a bunch of money, I wouldn't accept it either. So this is what Devin Haney is facing now. Earl Spence faced it. Charlos faced it, and that's why Spence was saying he'll just drop the belts and move up if he can't get the Crawford fight. And Spence is adamant about not fighting Thurman, but at the same time, he's going to have to make a decision. He's going to have to fight somebody at welterweight if Crawford doesn't want to do it, or he's going to have to start letting belts go, pay step-aside fees, or figure it out. And it's just real unfortunate because you look at what happened with AJ and Wilder. I mean, that fight should have happened, but it didn't. Now look at what position we're in. AJ is about to fight Usyk again. If he beats Usyk, then he's going to go and should fight Tyson Fury. If him and Tyson Fury fight, and Tyson Fury wins, maybe he does a rematch, maybe he doesn't. But if he wins, he doesn't want to do the rematch for whatever. He gives up the belts, and now the belts go back to the organizations, and now you have these 4 belts floating around, and everybody fighting for them, and who knows how long it'll take to get an undisputed champion in the heavyweight division again. You see, so it's just these are moments in time that it's not often the stars line up like that where we can get these huge fights. And I just would hate to miss that opportunity, which looks like we may get it at heavyweight, but for Keith Thurman, man, for Terrence Crawford and Earl Spence to miss that opportunity, it'll be horrible. It'll be horrible, man. So hopefully they can sort that out. But if not, I'm telling y'all right now, come down Keith Thurman. I'm telling you, man, Keith Thurman gonna slide in there. Y'all we'll just sit back and watch and see how it develops. I'm telling you, Keith Thurman is gonna end up in a big fight with somebody. He may end up fighting Crawford before Spence, because Spence is adamant about not fighting him. But don't be surprised, and I'm gonna tell you why. If what's his name gets in there, if Spence gets in there because you got Terrence Crawford at the WBO. Forge Ortiz, that ain't gonna happen. He got held to boot sentence. I don't know. Conor Ben, I doubt they're gonna fight him. But Keith Thurman looking like some food right now. You know, he's looking Keith Thurman looking real scrumptious right now. You know, that's a little food right there for Terrence Crawford to come in and eat. And that's a great feather in his cap. If he can come down and clip Keith Thurman, then he has that in his cap. And that's all he's going to do is make negotiations even more difficult between him and Spence. But we'll see, man. I'll leave you guys with that. So, Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence seems like the sticking point is Crawford. I feel that he signed and agreed to a lot of things, and they put that final packet in front of him. Need the wet signature, and he's like, nah. And I think that's a sticking point. Mandatories for Spence, starting to hit him. You'll have to make a decision. If not, he's going to start losing belts. Then with Devin Haney, outstanding job, has a bunch of belts. Had to pay a lot of money for them and sanctioning fees. And every time he goes to defend those belts, he has to pay money for those sanctioning fees to defend the belts. And the opponent has to pay a portion of his purse to those organizations for attempting to fight for the chance to win the damn title. So it's ridiculous. And I wouldn't want to give up my money for that crap either, man. But anyway, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Shout out to all the veterans. And as always, yo, I'm in the breeze.